Hey, I'm Brad Miller and here with Jason Medford. And today we're going to talk about buying a car. Yes, we're
Yes.
talking about buying a car on a spiritual podcast because as we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, everything is spiritual, as is buying a car.
Yeah. And so a lot of you are going to be like, okay, you guys are smoking something. And no, we're not. Okay. But we thought it would be kind of a fun example because like Brad said, we keep telling you everything is spiritual. So let's just pick something, and again, if you're a regular listener, you kind of know Brad's story, how his wife ended up in an accident. She was safe, but the car was totaled. Some
Mhm.
of the things around that of him kind of saying, hey, you know what, I dealt better with it now than I would have 2 or 3 years ago, right? So I'm on the path. I'm doing better. um,
Yep.
but take what seems to be just a menial routine sort of thing and show how it is spiritual, or how it can be if you kind of place your attention or think about it that way. So okay, so Brad, and I don't know the story yet. I'm getting everything fresh off of this too, so I haven't heard Brad's whole story about this. But where I guess where do you want to start in this story, Brad, to kind of get into this?
I think a lot of people, when they think about the idea of shopping for a car, they kind of picture this awful, terrible experience dealing with pushy salespeople and lots of standing around and waiting and just not a really pleasant situation. um I think that's kind of that's the perception a lot of people have going into it, and that was completely the opposite of how I went into this whole thing. Because I know we talked about in the previous episode about how my wife hit the deer and both the car and the deer got totaled in it. And I could have been like, all right, this is awful, this is a terrible thing, now I've got to go through the process of finding a new car and replacing the one I have. And I went from having a car that's paid off to now I have to go back to having car payments again. And like I could have had this really terrible thought about the whole process, but instead I chose to think of it as an adventure, as an opportunity that you don't get to do every day. Like, how often do you actually go and get a new car? For some people who maybe wait until the car you know dies on them, it could be 10, 12, whatever years on the car before they go do this again. So I decided I was going to approach this whole process with not only something this is going to be fun. I had to go test drive these cars. This is going to be a good time. But I went into it with a thought this is going to be easy. Like, it's not going to be a stressful situation at all. This is going to be something that is going to be pleasant. And I'm not going to have expectations about the process. It's going to take what time it takes, and I'm going to come out with the best car for me, whatever that may be. And there was some ideas I might have had, but for the most part, we just kind of let things come out as it did. So.
So I think, and again, I'll kind of stop and summarize a little bit to just kind of reinforce some of the stuff we've talked about.
Mhm.
But this first part of, like you said, most people see car buying as an awful experience, stressful,
Mhm.
sleazy car salesman, all the kind of stuff that goes along with that, right?
Mhm.
So, but you chose to have a different perspective or perception on what you wanted that experience to be, right? And so again,
Yep.
it just raises up that whole idea of intention, and expectations is the wrong thing, because again, we're not expecting certain results. We're kind of surrendering to it, but it's like, hey, I want this to be an easy and fun experience, right? Because like you said, you don't buy a new car every year. I mean, some people do every year, every 2 or 3 years if they're leasing, but for the most part, we don't. Those of us who kind of buy the car and then keep it until we no longer need it or it no longer runs, a lot of times it's 10, 15 years, right?
Right.
So that was a good point of, going into this situation kind of with the right attitude and the right intention of it being fun and easy, right? And
Mhm.
so again, I don't know the whole story too, so I want to kind of hear some of the fun and easy stuff, right? So I know you went and test drove some cars. What were some of the different
Yeah.
cars that you went and test drove, and what was the experience like?
Yeah. So before we kind of started to do the test drive process, I talked to my wife and we came up with a, like what kind of thing we're looking for. Like, we decided that we wanted something with all-wheel drive that would be good for the area that we live in. And and I don't really like necessarily the way that SUVs drive. I like more of a sedan sort of a feel. And if I'm driving a car, I want the enjoyment of driving a car. So I wanted some sort of an all-wheel drive sedan.
Mhm.
And that right there really limited it down to a handful of vehicles. I wasn't necessarily looking for any luxury models or anything like that. So I came up with a list of, I know, was it 5 or 6 different cars that I was interested in, and then look to see where there were dealerships around that would have those vehicles. So I could then come up and say, all right, well, here's the ones I want to check out, and here's where I can go to check those out. And so we devoted a Saturday to go and just test drive cars. We shipped my daughter off to her grandma's house, and we started, all right, where's the first one on the list, the closest to us, and kind of went from there. We started at a Toyota dealership, and met probably my favorite salesperson. Very first thing, who was very low key. He was very like, "Hey, what are you looking for? You interested in a test drive? Here you go. Here are the keys are in it." That kind of deal. Is very pleasant and enjoyable to work with. So that started off the morning really well in a positive light. Um, we touched on a couple cars. One was really nice, but probably not what I was really looking for, a little bit above what I was looking for. Um, and then other cars we drove, we were actually disappointed in. We expected it to be a little higher quality, and just the ride wasn't, and the feel of the build wasn't that way.
Mhm.
Um, and I should probably, like, we decided we're looking for, I wanted a new car. Everything in the past I've always had bought used cars. But we decided, you know what, I don't want to have to deal with the all the maintenance issues and all that kind of stuff that comes with a used car. I want something that's going to be brand new that I don't have to worry about that stuff.
Mhm.
At the lower cost of per year ownership. So that kind of dictated what I started to look at and where I went. So that was the first trip of the morning. And kind of locked there, like, well, this one would be nice. It's probably not what we're going to go with, but kind of got us in I think the right mindset. And again, I didn't get down when the one car wasn't up to snuff. We just kind of went down to the road to the next dealership.
Mhm. So what happened at
And
the next dealership then? I'm starting to
so
see
the
some weaves here that I'm going to tie back in, but I want to kind of see a couple
Yeah,
more of these. Yeah.
so the next dealership was a Subaru dealership.
Mhm.
Because Subaru, or not Subaru, but a Kia dealership. I'm sorry. And in the past, my wife has known Kias as kind of these cheap little, you want the cheapest thing you can get, they'll still get you from where to go. That's what you buy a Kia for. Um, they've changed and improved a lot since then. I believe they were bought by Hyundai, who's done a lot with the brand or whatever. But I kind of went into it as like, you know what, they've got a 4-wheel drive sedan, an all-wheel drive. I mean, let's test it out. And I really enjoyed the car. It was a blue car, kind of bright blue. And it was kind of a fun thing to drive around and test drive. It definitely was better than the cars that we'd driven previous at the Toyota dealership. And so we were like, yep, this is definitely one that's on our list to consider to go forward. It had it kind of checked all the boxes. Like I said, it was all-wheel drive, was a sedan. I kind of wanted something that would have either like a sunroof or like open top to let sunlight and stuff like that in. That's something kind of important to me. And ultimately, that was something that I enjoyed driving. Like, I'm not planning on doing a ton of driving with it because I work from home, but I wanted something that I would enjoy driving down the road in. If I didn't want to drive it, if I was like, this is not very enjoyable, then what's the point, right? Which actually, I mean, that's something that I kind of take throughout life at this point is, if I'm doing something that's not enjoyable, what's the purpose? What's the point? Right.
Okay, so we got the Toyota dealership, then you went to the
Yep.
Kia, and like I said, I think
Yep.
there's some interesting points that Brad's making that I want to come back, but I kind of like to get more of
Sure.
the story. So Toyota, Kia, then what was next?
Yep. So then I decided that I was going to go and test drive one of the cars that on my wish list, a car that I had wanted to drive that I kind of had on necessarily a vision board, but like, I saw myself someday driving a car like this. So we went to an Audi dealership. I went and I drove an Audi, which is something I've always wanted to do. In the past, I had felt um, out of place, would have felt out of place at an Audi dealership. Like, this is not a place that people like me would get a car. Like, I'm better off with the Toyota dealership than I'm here at this more of a luxury brand. But I had no feeling like that at all. Went to the dealership and met and talked with the dealer or the salesperson, who was probably my second favorite salesperson. Again, very low pressure. And I, had a great time driving the car. It was a great ride. Again, checked all the boxes off. I knew it was going to be more than what we were looking to spend at the time, which was fine. But again, the purpose of that was just to have that trip was just to have fun. Like, just to be able to drive it, just for the experience of being able to sit in there and drive that car. And so that's kind of what I went with. And I, like I said, satisfied that completely.
Okay, so we got Toyota, Kia, Audi. I know
Yep.
you mentioned Subaru, so Subaru comes in here somewhere, but what
That is the
else?
next place
What
we
else?
went. Yep. We had to
Subaru
drive
was
across
next.
town to
Okay.
the Subaru dealership. Subaru is known for their all-wheel drive vehicles, so it made perfect sense that would where we'd go. We'd go check stuff out. And was very disappointed. I had found that I had some expectations for what it would be because of that. Because, in my mind, well, Subaru all-wheel drive is kind of what they do. They're known for that, the quality. They supposedly have very good resale value and things like that. And driving it, I was like, I mean, it's better than Toyota that we drove the first, the first place, but it still didn't match up to the Kia even. Despite that, the ride just wasn't as nice. It just wasn't as enjoyable to ride. And I knew, like, you know what? Could it be on the list? Probably, but the Kia not only is a little bit cheaper, but it's more fun to drive. So the
Interesting.
Subaru was a no there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Was there anything else, or were those the only ones you went
So
to?
then the last car that I was looking to do was a Nissan.
Okay.
So the last two cars I've had, including the one that met its demise with the deer, was the Nissan Altima. And now Nissan Altimas come in all-wheel drive versions. So I was like, all right, well, we'll check it out. Now I went through this whole process kind of thinking, you know what, it might be fun to have something different. I've had two Nissan Altimas. They were very similar in the cars to each other. It may be fun to do something like different. The Kia would be different color, different feel, whatever like that. I don't want to feel like I'm kind of getting in the rut of always the same thing. So I'm trying to be open to these other cars and things. So we drove the Nissan. First of all, the salesperson was the most pushy person that we met the whole time. He came out at one point after we were done driving. He was like, the tradition, like, what would take you to get in this car today, sort of deal. And my thoughts in my head was absolutely nothing. Like, there's nothing that you can say or do at this point that would get me to buy this car today from you, because you were very pushy. And like, I explained, I've had this almost exact same car twice in a row now. Like, everything is very similar. Like, things are where I'm used to them being. There's only slight changes, upgrades. But yeah, he pretty much treated me like I'd never been in a car before, and felt like he had to go through every single feature. Even was like, oh, yep, I'm familiar with that one, but yep, kept on going with it. So it was a very bad experience. But my wife and I just kind of laughed at it at the end afterwards, because we're like, this kid is trying way too hard. He was the youngest person we dealt with. He's obviously trying really hard to make a sale here. So I got to give him credit for that. Like, he's hustling, he's trying here, but he's not listening.
Yeah.
like what I'm trying to tell him, he's not listening to it. He's got the spiel in his head about what he's got to do, and he's got to follow the script. And I like the car, but I wouldn't buy, if I decided to buy Nissan, I would not buy one from him specifically because of that.
Interesting.
So those were the dealership, those were the cars that I had looked into that were on my list. And so I'm like, all right, I hate to say it, but the Nissan was the most enjoyable to drive of all of them. The cars seemed to be the most solid of all of them that I drove. It had the best kind of get up when you hit the gas, the acceleration. It just seemed the most sturdy. Like it just felt like the best car. And so I'm like, I really wanted to try something different, but that was kind of what felt the best. My wife's like, well, let's, I want to make sure that it's not just because that's what's familiar to you. So let's redrive some of these other ones. Let's go and redrive a Subaru, and let's do the Kia, and let's do them back to back. Like, cause we had like a lunch break between a couple, and we did the Audi in there and stuff. And so she's like, there's been some time, let's do back to back to back and see what you think when you've driven them back to back, and compare them directly that way. So I went and I did the Kia again, and I did a Subaru again, and same thing came out. You know what? It's the Nissan. It feels the best.
Interesting. Okay, so before we get to the end of the story, for sure, let's just kind of talk about this, because again, from a spiritual perspective, right? I mean, what can we learn here, and how this was a spiritual experience for Brad, right? And I know one of the things that you talked about at the beginning was criteria, right? That you had kind of come up with criteria. You said, look, I'd like it to be all-wheel drive, sedan, because I like the feel of a sedan. I want something new. I don't want used. I'd like to have a sunroof, or some kind of thing over the top, but something that you enjoy to drive, right? Because you wanted to feel excited to go out and get in your car and feel excited that you're buying a new car, right? Because that excitement, right, is a higher vibration frequency, right? And so again, we want to try to, spiritually speaking too, we want to get to those spaces as much of the time that we can. So you set some criteria, but you weren't necessarily limiting in what you had chosen. And again, maybe there's some subconscious stuff, because like you said, the Nissan is what you're used to, and you have certain perceptions about some of the brands, or maybe some of the salespeople, right, that you're dealing with as well. But you just kind of came up with the criteria. Mm-hmm. You had a plan, and you kind of went boom, 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 right? And then I think, again, what was kind of interesting at the end of it is, you and your wife sat down and said, okay, well, now let's, just because this is the last one that we went to, let's not just, oh, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, let's buy it because I'm just done car shopping. Right. But to be able to stop and kind of tune and listen. Right. Because again, I know you well enough too, that it's like, when you were driving and you say it feels right, it wasn't, you were feeling it from a spiritual standpoint. I'm guessing. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I know how you are. You were probably kind of sitting there saying, again, going within, kind of like, well, this meets the criteria. Is this, in my highest and best use, right? Is this the one that I need to be in right now? Or is this the one that I need to be in right now? And you obviously, there was probably some logical stuff that was still going on, but that you were trying to quiet your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And really get that sense from the universe, what is best for you right now. Because ultimately it doesn't matter, right? Any of these cars would get you from point A to point B. Utilitarian wise, it would be fine. But again, from where you're trying to feel, where you're trying to be, obviously having a car that you love, that you enjoy, driving is going to be important. Now, I wanted to ask you too about the Audi, because again, I kind of know from there but just to bring this up a little bit too of, again, maybe rewind 4 or 5 years ago, it sounds like you wouldn't have even gone into an Audi dealership. Like, you know, I guess, well, why wouldn't you have gone into an Audi dealership 5 years ago? What would have been the things going through your head, or what would have stopped you from going there?
Well, I mean, the very first thing was I can't afford anything here. Um, and I'm not the kind of person that shops here. The salesperson is just going to take a look at me and realize that I'm just here to, and not actually going to be able to buy anything. And, and I went into that. He's not expecting to buy anything anyway. But, in the past, I would have been like, well, what's the point? Like, I'm never going to buy anything. I can't afford it. It's, it's above kind of the price that I'm looking for at this point. It's a nicer thing than what I've had in the past. Like, why even bother? Let's just skip on and let's focus on like what the next place that's, got something more realistic. I know in the past I saw myself as kind of a realist, which is really just a fancy way of saying I was a pessimist.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I got to write that one down, right? Realistic actually equals pessimistic, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I'm gonna, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to use some slightly different wording. That because I felt this way too, right? And when you say, well, I'm not really the kind of person that shops there, a lot of times what we're really saying, right, to ourselves is, I'm not worthy or good enough for that.
Yep.
Right. And that's, when you say it that way, that like stings a little bit more. Right. But what it tells me about Brad, because I've known him for several years now and I've seen his growth and development too, is now Brad has a better sense of self-worth to realize that Brad is good enough to drive an Audi. He's no different than anyone else. That, again, he can do that if he wants to, but again, no expectations to it. Right. It's just something that was fun that you wanted to do. So why not? Right.
Exactly.
I mean, you've got time on the Saturday, your daughter's with grandma anyway. Just go have fun. Cars. Right? Just go test drive it.
Stop in.
But I thought too, what was interesting is at the end when you were at the Nissan dealer and you said the salesperson was just horrible.
Yep.
Again, an act of spiritual maturity was, instead of getting sucked down into and feeling manipulated and, oh my gosh, icky about this guy, you and your wife chose to just laugh about it. Right. Which I think, and kind of put it in perspective, of, well, yeah, it's a young kid. He's probably, one of the newer salespeople. He's probably getting ridden by his sales manager to perform, and he's been taught, the standard script, because what is it going to take to get you in that car today? That's a standard sales technique that they teach all of them. And so you could kind of see and realize, and maybe even separate the person from what was coming out of his mouth a little bit too. Like, the kid's just trying hard. He's pissing me off and he's not listening, but he's trying. And so I'm going to give him credit for that. Right. Where, again, years ago, you might have just gotten angry about it, held on to it, and got in that space like, no, shut up. I'm the one buying here. You listen to me, mister, kind of a thing.
Right. And then fumed as we drove home. Exactly.
Yeah. But you didn't do that as well. Right. So interesting. So drum roll. So what did Brad end up deciding to do? What did you come home with?
So that was a Saturday.
That was a Saturday.
We came home and I just kind of collapsed on the couch after all that. And like, that was exhausting. It was fun at the time. Like, I, could feel the energy when I was going and everything else. But then definitely when I got home, I just got like a woof and it was gone. And like, I just need to like take a long nap. It's kind of the way that I felt after all that. And so the next day was Sunday. We didn't do anything on Sunday. And then it came Monday. and my wife was working remote that day, and so I'm like, I'd kind of like to go out and kind of test drive that Kia again. It's local dealership, so it's going to take 15 minutes to get there. Um, you know, because I know that I enjoyed the Nissan, and driving it next to the um the uh the Nissan, but those are one and two for me. So I've got it down to these two, and I'd kind of like to drive it again, just to make sure that that's kind of, I know that I'm comfortable in knowing what I'm doing, what I want to do, right? So we went back to the Kia dealership, had the same salesperson we did last time, Pedro was his name, and took another test drive in that one. And then I actually let my wife drive as well, because the first on Saturday, she didn't do any driving. It was all me. She's like, you know what? This is your car. This is all your thing. You drive. I'm going to stay out of it. Then on Monday, when we went out, she actually drove. Then I pulled off to the side and switched with her. And then she got a chance to drive as well. And she's like, okay, yep, that was a fun car, whatever. She really liked the color and stuff as well. Again, that bright blue, and they actually had a red version too. And she's like, yeah, it was a really good car. She's like, I think you'd be happy with it. And so I'm like, well, I'd kind of like to test drive the Nissan again, then right next to it again, just to verify that, because again, she want to make sure that it was actually like, this is what I felt was the right one, and not that I was trying to like think through it and all that stuff. So we went to a different Nissan dealership, one that we'd gone to the last time, or actually the very first time I looked for a car and had a terrible experience at. And so we're like, you know what? We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're closer. They've got a model that we can test drive. We're just going to go to test. We're not going to buy there because it was like a black. I mean, that was the other thing, is I didn't no white cars and no black cars. And the one they had there was black. So I'm like, I'm not going to buy the car there, but at least I can test drive it, and then back to back and again and verify. And then also my wife could drive it as well and see if she got the same feeling that I did. So we went to the dealership and drove that car. And then she drove it. And as soon as like we like got back into our car to leave, she's like, yep, the Nissan. She's like, there's just like you can just tell, like, that's the car. And so we were like, yep, let's go with the Nissan. So then it was up to figuring out the details of getting something. And throughout this process, I have been visualizing myself sitting in a car in my driveway. Not a specific model or brand or anything, but sitting in a car, both in my driveway, driving down the road, and just the feeling of enjoying being in there, of enjoying driving down the road. And so I kind of have kept doing this throughout the whole process of, this is the car. I don't know what exactly it's going to be, but I know it's going to be the best thing for me as I'm doing this. I'm going to come out with. And then on Tuesday, we're like, all right, let's make this happen. So we really liked the first dealer. I told you that's that Toyota dealer, the very first thing. The company that owns that dealership actually owns a couple of Nissan dealerships. In fact, the one with the bad salesperson, they own that one as well.
Huh.
So I reached out to the first guy named Bill and was like, hey, Bill, we've been driving these things around. And actually this was still Monday afternoon. We've decided that what kind of car we want with this Nissan. I know that you don't have it there because you're a Toyota dealership, but is it something that you could help us with in one of your sister dealerships? And he's like, well, unfortunately, no. Like, I'm kind of limited to right here, but let me connect you with somebody at one of our other dealerships, the Nissans, that can help you. And so he's like, I'll let me send a message to him and I'll have somebody call you. So within an hour, we got a call from another Bill at this other Nissan dealership, which was actually the same Nissan dealership that I bought my last car from. But now since we moved, we're not quite as close to it anymore. So we hadn't gone there before, but so he reached out and we made arrangements then to come in to check out specifically the Nissan Altima that they had on premises that kind of checked all the boxes for us that they had.
So in you go.
So we get them on Tuesday. It was raining. Bill wasn't there yet, but he had got the car set up and ready for us. We went in. It's like, oh yeah, Bill said you're coming. Would you guys like to take it for a drive before he gets here? Here are the keys. So I took it on a quick test drive. I'm like, that's it. And we made it happen. And Tuesday we drove home in my new Nissan Altima.
And what color?
It is gray, the exact same color as my previous two Nissan Altimas.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. So, well, it's, and again, it's so what I found really interesting too, which I think is it's a good lesson for all of us as well, right? Is that, you know, in buying something like this, you know, a car, you got to buy a new car, a new Nissan from a Nissan dealership. That's just the way the rules work, right? But, you know, Bill at the Toyota dealership, I think you said that he was the one that you just really appreciated the most, that you
Yep.
liked the most. And so, you know, how was it to, you know, to have that thought come in, you know, and I guess maybe that's may be part of the spiritual journey too, is just like, why did you decide to call Bill at Toyota when you knew he couldn't sell you a Nissan, right?
Well, I mean, we didn't know
That
he couldn't
idea
at that
came in
point.
somewhere, but
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that he couldn't do it. And so I'm like, is it something that you could do? Like, can you help me with because it's at a sister dealership, could they maybe like ship it to your location and you could sell it to me? Like what you know, what can be, because we really liked working with you there when we test drove that first thing in the morning. And so we'd love to be able to work with you on this as well.
interesting. But, you know, again, where you know, you met somebody that you had a good connection with, you felt the good energy, reached
Yep.
back out, you know, again, can you help me? And sure enough, right, he was able to find somebody at one of the sister dealerships who,
Mm-hmm.
you know, again, I mean, if he's a good salesperson and he's, you know, we just talked about this on the one that we just recorded before, right? But Bill did you a solid.
Mm-hmm.
He might have gotten paid for it. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if they have some inter dealership kind of bonus thing or something, but he probably just did you a solid. Like, hey, I'm grateful that these people told me that they really enjoyed working with me. Let me help them find someone like me at the Nissan dealership, right?
Yep.
And be able to set you up for, even though I'm not the one making the sale, right? Bill's going to get compensated from the universe in one way or another. The
Some
fact
way.
that we're sitting here saying his name and you're thinking about him and I'm thinking about him, Bill's getting some blessings, right? But what's interesting, I just find that kind of a fascinating. That's one of those different possibilities. I never even would have thought to do that, or even the idea of you looking at it and saying, you know what, we really had a bad experience with that salesperson at the other Nissan dealership. Let's, you know, open it up and see what are some of the other Nissan dealerships that are around. Now, I want to bring this up too to kind of talk about, you know, maybe to kind of close up a little bit. But what's interesting is you ended up effectively buying the same car, just a few years newer, right? And
And an all-wheel
so
drive. Yeah.
it all-wheel drive, and you went through this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, you kind of came down to what I will say, you know, because again, people that are skeptical of what we're talking about would say, oh, Brad, this was not spiritual at all. Brad just selected what he was comfortable with. And he's trying to justify, you know, and come up with these reasons or these things to make it into a spiritual thing. And it's not. It was an unconscious, you know, subconscious decision, because that's what Brad was familiar with. So how would you respond back to somebody on that, because again, I know that's not what happened, but I could see
Sure.
a lot of people saying exactly
Yeah.
that thing.
So two things. First is um, the reason why I went back to the Kia dealership was because I really wanted that to be the one. Like I'm like, you know what? It's a different. It's just something different that I've not had before. It's not the same. Like it doesn't have like things are in different places. It doesn't, it's a different color than what I'm used to. Like I wanted that to be the choice, and that's what I told my wife is like I really want this to be the one. Like I don't, I want something different. I don't necessarily want it to feel like I'm just doing the same thing over. And so I was trying to consciously pick something different. But at the end of the day, I realized like that was while it was a great car, and it checked off all the boxes, it just wasn't the right fit. It just didn't have the right feel for me. And my wife said the same thing. Like she's like I said, after we test drove the Nissan that second time, she was like, "Yeah, it's gonna be the Nissan." She's like, she could feel it too when she was driving that was the one that was gonna be best.
Well, so you use that little word, that F word again, feel,
Yep.
right? You felt it. I mean, again, all the cars that you drove fit the 3D criteria, right?
Yep.
And so, any of them would have been suitable for what you needed the car to do.
Mm-hmm.
But what was important is the feel part of it, right? Not the thinking.
Yep.
The thinking you already did and kind of coming up with the criteria, the thinking you already did and kind of, figuring out where the local dealers were that were within your area, setting
Mm-hmm.
aside the time. But then it becomes an exercise of feeling into it, right? And,
Yep.
and and I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember, many years ago, it was when the Priuses had been out for a little while, and I thought, oh, maybe to be nice, a lot higher gas mileage, more
Yep.
eco-friendly. And so I remember I went to, because I've had Toyotas for a long time, myself. That's just what I've gravitated to over and over again, just because for a lot of different reasons. But and so I remember going and test driving a Prius, because again, I had kind of thought, well, this would be different, right?
Yep.
But I remember getting in and sitting down, and there was just something about the way everything was configured that I just didn't feel comfortable in it. It
Mm-hmm.
was it was kind of weird, but it was a feeling. It wasn't anything analytical, necessarily, but I just didn't feel right sitting in it. Right. And I'm guessing again, you probably kind of you can tell the reason you test drive is literally when you get in and sit down, you can kind of feel what's right for you or what's not right for you. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
like if I sit down, I might feel one way. Brad sits down in the same car, he may feel a different way. Right. Because again, energetically, alignment, everything is kind of different for us. But I
Yep.
think that's where, getting back to that feeling and realizing that that one just felt right. You just knew that was the right one, even though you were wanting it to be the Kia.
Right. Yep.
Right. And
And then
so
the key
again,
was
and
it
so, and
was
so again, I get it. It's like, no, I want something different, but you also didn't just try to plow forward with that and say, no, I'm going to do the Kia because I can't do the same thing that I've always done. Right. It's like,
right.
I mean, I wear the same shoes, the same exact shoes, right? I've got one model of running shoes that I wear all the time. Same brand, same model. I buy the same one. I've been doing that for 8 years, 5 years, 8 years, something like that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't even go look at other ones, right? Because it feels right to me, right? And every time
Mm-hmm.
I get a new one, it just feels right, And so again, we don't have to change just for the sake of changing, you know. But hey, at the same point, if I get this tap that says, "Hey, you should go check out this other kind of shoe next
Mm-hmm.
time," I'm going to go listen. I'm going to go check out another kind of shoe.
Mm-hmm.
I might still come back and decide to buy the other one, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that you actually are following, right?
Yep.
Following the breadcrumbs, following the inspiration, learning in the process along the way. Because again, you know, you were walking into the unknown. You didn't know what car you were going to get for sure. I mean, you didn't know until Wednesday afternoon, or sorry, Monday afternoon, probably which one you were going to go with. You had 3 days of, just trying stuff out, seeing how you feel. Try something out, see how you feel. Try something out, see how you feel, right? Which again is, that's a way to make everything into a spiritual experience, right? Does this feel right? Try something else. Does this feel right? Get quiet, go within yourself. Does this feel right? Does that feel right? Right? These are all part of learning how to trust ourselves better, and kind of go along with the process, right? And again, it can be applied to a new car. It can be applied to lots of different things, right? I'm not going to get into the whole thing because we got to wrap up this episode, but I'm doing some landscaping on the side of my house. And again, most people would just go out there, draw up the plans, do everything, done, hire somebody, whatever, get it all done to whatever preconceived thing they had in mind. I knew, kind of similar to you, there's a criteria of why I need to do some of the landscaping for drainage, for some storage, for some just general beautification, right? There's some different criteria and reasons for why I'm trying to do it. And I had a general idea, but I've been sitting with this for a few months. I've been looking at this part of my property and just kind of thinking about it and coming up with different possibilities. And even now, my yard is somewhat torn up because I'm just doing a little bit. It's like, well, I don't quite have all the details worked out yet. And so I'd go out there and, rake around, shovel some stuff, move things, move some of the rocks, and then go and sit down and think about it again. And then go out and do a little bit more and go back and think about it again. Right. And again, as I'm doing those little things, I'm getting closer and closer. And at the end of the day, does it really matter 3D? No, it doesn't matter at all. Does not matter. I didn't even have to do anything, but I'm choosing to use that particular experience as a way for me to have a spiritual experience, for me to feel gratitude and love for my property and my house and the land and the trees and everything else, and trying to beautify it and feeling that love and that gratitude for it, of listening, trying to listen and co-create what I'm creating with the help of the universe, right? By listening and seeing what would be in my highest and best interest of doing it, right? I could have gone out there and I could have banged everything out in a day, but I chose to go slower because I'm trying to use this as a growth experience as well, and to help me kind of tune in better. So anything that you're doing can be. We've talked about washing dishes and cleaning your house before and different things that, but this is a little bit more in depth on, here's a real life example of how you can take what seems like a pretty meaningless 3D experience and actually, turn it into something spiritual.
Yeah. And if you have further doubts about the spiritual nature of it, I had gone in thinking that I wanted to pay ideally $400 or less a month. That would kind of put me in line with what I had previously. Based on, and I, looked at the money that I had coming from the car that got totaled from the insurance company. And I'm like, okay, I think if I put most of this money down on it and whatever like that with monthly pay, I can come up with that number. So I get to the dealer, and when going through the process, they're like, well, we can only use half of what, we're only up to half of what you've got available to put down. We can only accept that for the process. And so, I told him, like,
they told you could only put a certain amount down. They
budget,
capped. Wow. Okay.
Because they want to make sure they get their certain interest, or
and their origination fee and everything. Yeah,
all that kind of stuff, right? And so I had tried to go for I wanted like 400 less. My car payment is $500.22 a month, and there's enough money left over, that half I didn't use, to easily cover that $100 extra
for the
for the
life
duration of the
of the loan.
period.
Well, and so that's again one where, at first you could have looked at it and said, oh man, this isn't working out the way I want it to. But it worked
Yep.
out exactly, just in a different format, because like you said, that since they wouldn't allow you to pay all the money down, it's like, oh well, okay, and then I'll just put that in my savings account, and that'll kind of
Exactly.
supplement the extra $100, and I'm still actually further ahead than where I kind of wanted to be. It just showed up different than you were expecting, but net it's the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Brad, thank you for sharing. Right? I mean, because again, we're just trying to share things that are practical and what we're doing, and show people that a lot of this stuff can be pretty practical, and isn't necessarily just sitting saying om for 45 minutes. But the more that you incorporate spirituality and kind of the sacredness into everything you do, you don't need to spend 4 hours a day on a mat, because you're spending 16 of your waking hours doing a little bit of something every day, which is a great point. So, all right. Any final things there, Brad, on that?
Enjoy the car ride, I guess.
Enjoy the car ride. As the Germans would say, Fahrvergnügen, right? Volkswagen, the joy of driving. They kind of took that as a marketing tagline. But anyway, no, it's I think too, it also shows that I think sometimes on a spiritual or religious path, sometimes we feel like we have to be austere, and we have to withhold, or not do some of these things. But at least for me, and a lot of what I've been taught, it's more important to feel happy and get yourself in those places of gratitude and love. And when you go out and get in your car and you're sitting there in the driveway, or you're driving down the road, it's going to put you in that better sense of well-being, which is, again, when you're in that state of well-being, messages come through more, and you're actually living more of a spiritual life at that point. So well done on the new car. So
I would say come and I'd give you a drive sometime, but if you ever in this neck of the woods,
I'm in that neck of the woods, I'm getting a car ride from Brad.
That's right.
And I'm going to wear my seatbelt too, because it's the right thing to do. Anyway,
it's the law.
It's the law. Here's the law in Ohio. Okay. I could go way down rabbit holes on that. So with that, everybody, go out, have a great rest of your week, and start thinking about some of the things that you're doing normally anyway, and see how you can actually use them as a way to improve and see things much more from a spiritual standpoint. So with that, we'll see you all in the next episode.
Catch you guys later.